Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. All things Middle Earth here. I want to talk really quickly about some changes, some nerfs I think that have happened in the game, and I want to get your feedback on whether or not you think that means there are more nerfs coming, specifically talking about classic gear in the game, or if this is just a kind of singular one-time thing that has to do with siege gear. So I want to look at siege gear and show you in a second what the changes have been, but also want to talk about whether or not I think classic gear is going to get nerfed or kind of phased out in the future. So stay tuned. That's coming up in just 1 second. Now, the devs have already posted about this, so I won't spend too much time, but long story short, pretty much all of the siege gear we have in the game has changes, save one piece, which actually I'm not even going to say it because I don't want to spoil it or like have the devs like, immediately see that and go, oh, wait, we need to do something. So I'm not even going to show what it is, but for the most part, siege gear and siege skills have changed from having just numerical values like plus whatever siege to a percent based thing. So for example, the Orthanc Devilry was +4 siege. So if you used Alchemist that had 30 siege, +4 is 34. Okay, so that's 34 on your Alchemist. Now, if you get 4% on your Alchemist with that same 30, it's 1.2 siege. So it's gotten almost 4 times worse in terms of the actual siege. Now, the question that we have to figure out, and we'll have to wait and see, and I don't know how quantifiable it is that they have actually changed the siege values, tried to simplify them for us, which again, nobody asked for, but like, I don't understand. But they have now changed things to a letter system. I'm assuming it's S through D. I think that's probably the range of it. That's usually how the tier list kind of scale works. So it says alchemists are S in siege and D in march speed, just as an example. So in their post, they basically just say that the values are being converted to like kind of the simplified form. Doesn't mention them changing. So until we know for sure, I'm going to assume that this is still the same. They've not changed alchemists. They're just showing it differently, and the alchemists have 30 siege. If that is the case, that means this got 4 times worse. That means any skills on commanders got worse. And the thing, kind of the reason I had this video idea was it also affects classic gear like the Shield of the White Hand with Siege of Urkai. Instead of this being, I think this was +12 for me before. It's now 8%, which is a lot less. I think this maxed out at 18 total siege. And again, if you do the math, it's way off. It's very easy to see just looking at the Orthanc Devilry, seeing it's almost 4 times worse. That's probably the case across the board. But math. So anyway, the classic gear has changed. All the gear has changed. Siege has been nerfed until we know for sure. And unless they raised the value of alchemists, for just as the example, as like the placeholder, unless they raised the siege of alchemists to 100, which would be more than tripling it, then it is in fact a nerf. Now, if they decide to change that and change it to 100 and just wanted to change the values of everything for no reason, then we're kind of the same. But I'd be surprised if that was the case. And I think that siege has been nerfed, which again, they've actually posted about that. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. Just that was the start of the conversation. The thing I would love your guys' thoughts on, and I think there are 2 sides to this, and I want to talk about both, is whether or not they're going to start phasing out classic gear. Because obviously classic gear was not exempt to these changes. If you look at the bow and talisman and a few other pieces, they are all now percent-based effects instead of just statistical or like numerical values being plus whatever siege. It is now a percent of siege. So the question is, are they going to slowly keep doing this to other classic gear, or is this classic gear siege specifically just kind of caught in the crossfire of a bad siege update? Now, I think the answer to this just depends on whether or not you have classic gear, because I think if you have good classic gear, you like classic gear and you don't want it to change, which makes sense because you maybe were more patient, kind of maybe took the risk to not update and just trying to go slow and figure things out. And so if you have good classic gear, you probably want classic gear to stay the same. However, on the flip side, if you're someone like me who I've been playing since day one, I had plenty of classic gear, but I just jumped headfirst in 2.0 because I'm trying to enjoy the game still, and it's changed a lot. And so I wanted to kind of just make a clean break and jump into 2.0. And it kind of feels like I'm being punished for that, because now I'm looking at my gear going, man, I had a fully refined Task of the Submerged Isle with Last Resort, which is plus 30% damage in the last 6 rounds. And I could be running that on some of my damage commanders who do late round damage and seeing a huge increase in their damage. That's just one example of a piece that I had fully refined as a gold piece, because I'm not like a crazy big whale. But I had lots of pieces like that that I would much rather have right now than the gear I do have. And so I'm sitting here thinking, man, this sucks. I'm almost being punished because I just had to jump into 2.0. So I think depending on whether or not you have them or not is where you land. That's kind of how I feel like it's going to be. But the question is, like, objectively speaking, should there be classic gear in the game? Does it make a lot of sense? And at the end of the day, I hold the devs responsible for this. I don't think they should put players in a situation to have to choose between one or the other, since there's not an option to go back and forth. And I just think if you're trying to facilitate a game that's growing, new players come in, they're excited about it, it doesn't make sense to fight someone and go, hey, how'd you get that classic gear, or whatever, whatever piece you're using that's doing, tactical mark, how'd you get that, or whatever on that planter, and they go, oh, it's a classic piece of gear, you can't get that anymore. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have that gate of like, hey, if you started playing the game after that, you can't get it, or even if you played before, you still probably got rid of it and are just not able to use it. I am a little bit biased, and I'm aware, so like I'd love to hear, especially if you guys have classic gear, I'd love to hear what you think. But I do think it weirdly puts players at odds, which I don't think is good for a game to move forward with. And I think everyone should just be on the same page. Now, again, should they have changed things at all in the first place? That's a whole different conversation. But here and now, should the game have two different like types of gear that you can technically still have? I don't think it makes a lot of sense. If there was a way to go back and forth, maybe. So again, there's still player choice, because at the end of the day is your gear, but there just isn't. And if you made the jump like me, you're kind of like, wow, my account could be a lot stronger, but it's not because of the choices I made with gear. So anyway, I don't want to make this too long. I just wanted to hear you guys' thoughts and kind of share that. Mostly just on this whole note of Siege changing. It had been brought to my attention. So shout out to K-Bar. We were talking about it in DMs about the different Siege changes and classic gear specifically changing, and wondering, is this a sign that they're going to start phasing out classic gear, or is this just a coincidence and Siege gear just got nerfed across the board? I'm curious what you guys think. So let me know really what your thoughts are on classic gear. Should it still be in the game? Should it not be? I'm biased. I think not. So I'm happy to hear conversations. So I'd love to hear if you have it, why you think it makes sense. And if there is any kind of win-win situation where it can still be in the game, but also maybe players like myself don't feel as kind of shafted, because it really does feel like, man, like I kind of like tried to follow the game's direction and like not support the devs, but I just tried to jump in and play the game and enjoy it, and I feel punished. So that kind of sucks. So let me know what you guys think. But that's going to do it for this one. And as always, we'll see you guys in another video.